Hello and welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast, hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer, endurance enthusiast, or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation, and just a little bit of entertainment. How are you doing? I am still on a high from being back on the microphone at Ironman UK in Bolton, and I'm excited to head back to the UK this week for Ironman 70.3 Staffordshire on Sunday. It really was so good to be back. I missed it so much and really only realised how much I missed it as we started building up to race day on site in Bolton. There were lots of COVID protocols in place as part of the Ironman global return to racing guidelines, but that didn't stop us from having a great race day. There's no doubt Ironman UK was a tough day for the athletes, battling the course, the distance and Mother Nature, who battered the athletes with torrential rain for a large part of the day. On the magic carpet, there were no sweaty hugs and high fives this year, but that didn't take away from the experience of crossing that finish line to the words, "You are an Ironman." It simply was delightful to be back. Congratulations to all finishers, from those who did their first event to those chasing personal bests, podiums and Kona slots. To those who didn't make it to the magic carpet, I hope you will return next year to tackle the course and beat it along with the elements. Special shout out to race champions Joe Skipper and Katrina Matthews. They have both been guests on the show. You can check out their stories in sport on our previous episodes and find out what motivates them to be the best athletes they can be in chasing their passion for sport. Closer to home, it was the Hardman race in Waterville that set hearts racing last weekend, with a much anticipated return to racing for lots of Irish athletes. Chris Minturn and Becky Woods taking the top step of the podium on the day. The Triathlon Ireland race calendar is filling up with races taking place over the coming weeks and months. It is super to see a return to racing here in Ireland, and long may it continue. I may even have to pick a race or two myself to take part in. With all my training over the past few months, my appetite for racing has certainly been ignited. So #watch this space. This Sunday sees the much anticipated try battle between Jan Frodeno and Lionel Sanders. Will you be tuning in? Who do you think will win this fight to the finish line? One thing is for sure, it will be an epic battle, and one that will be talked about for quite a while after. In this week's episode of the podcast, I chatted with Padraig Marrey from Mayo, a name synonymous with cycling not only in Mayo and Ireland but further afield. Padraig lives, breathes and embraces cycling like no other person I have ever met. From racing and race directing, bike packing to coaching, committees and volunteering, he's done it all and is one of the most committed advocates and ambassadors for the sport of cycling that you will ever come across. So much so, you rarely see Padraig without a bike of some sort attached whilst he is telling you about the latest plan, challenge or initiative he is involved with. As a youngster, his bike was his mode of transport to get to school and to his swimming lessons. The thrill of adventure and opportunity for fun started him on a journey for life that would see him start bike racing at the tender age of 14 in 1987 when Stephen Roche won the Tour de France. A high performer in sport across boxing, running and rugby, it was down the cycling path where Padraig really followed his passion for sport, both as an athlete and coach. He raced the Ross in Ireland 12 times within a 30-year period, raced abroad for a period of time, holds multiple race titles and coaching accolades, is a race director for triathlon and cycling events, and has recently completed an off-road Everesting challenge on the side of Patrick with some fellow cycling enthusiasts in Mayo. In addition to this, he won Gale Force in 2010 and was the All-Ireland Adventure Race Champion in 2011. The list of accolades and achievements are vast and diverse, his versatility as an athlete evident in his success in sport. In some ways, the bigger and more obscure the challenge, the greater the excitement for Padraig. However, in 2014 he faced his biggest challenge of them all, a fight for life. Thankfully, he has come out the other side of this challenge and continues to inspire, encourage and motivate the people around him and beyond, young and old, to enjoy the lifelong skill of cycling and all its joys and jubilations. Enjoy the show. This is a good one. Padraig Marrey, good afternoon and welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks for inviting me along. Great to be here.
You are very welcome. Now, you have so much cycling experience under your belt. It's hard to know where to start with you. But the very first thing I'm going to ask you about is the fact that you did a big cycle today and yesterday from Mayo down to Killaloo and back in support of a friend who's trying to cycle from Mayo to Cove.
Yeah, we set up a little group called Get Me Hall to Cove. So it's kind of funny, really. It was a bit of we're taking the mickey a little bit, but it was he wanted to get down to Cove. It's nearly 300k from Westport, so we decided, sure, we go down a bit of the way with him. So we decided to go as far as Killaloo, and we brought our luggage with us. So we have those big, I wouldn't call them a saddlebags, but they fit underneath the saddle. They're like a big tube, and they take a couple of litres of clothes. So we brought that down, and stayed over in Killaloo and enjoyed the ambience around the hotel. Very lovely spot. Really, I wouldn't have never stayed there before. I really enjoyed it.
Was that considered being out now that you went to Killaloo? You're not just out at the pub, you're gone out because you cycled 180k to go out.
Yeah, I suppose, you could call it that. You could call it that. Different way, different out, but it was cool. It's really cool to do.
Padraig, I really don't know where to start with you with regards to chatting about your background in sport. And rather than try and tell the listeners what I know, it's probably better that you maybe start from the start as to how you got into cycling, which would have been your main sport for many, many years. Somebody told me you used to cycle messing as a child on a bike, and you used to cycle to Claremorris, which was 22 kilometres away, to go swimming. And that's how you got started on a high Nelly.
Well, I had no proper bike when I was growing up, as in races or anything like that. I started off with a little small, it was like a rally chopper, to call it a tomahawk. So I started off with that at the age of 5 and moved on to all various types of high Nellies. But a friend of mine was, he wasn't a good runner, but he was actually quite a strong cyclist, and he was big into swimming. And in fairness, I like to swim as well. So rather than annoy our parents to bring us over and back, we used to cycle over. I used to cycle over behind him. He had a racing bike, so I used to sit in behind him, carry our gear into the swimming pool and come back out. And we used to have, maybe at the time it was pounds, and I might have a pound to spend. So we used to always kind of work out what was the best way. How much food could you get for a pound? So we worked out custard creams is probably, we get 3 packs of custard creams at the time for a pound. So that's what we used to do. We'd eat it, we'd munch them, and then we'd blast off home. So I did that for a couple of years, but it wasn't done for competition or anything like that. But swimming and cycling, kind of, they tailored each other.
You're showing your age by telling us that you could get 3 packs of custard creams for a pound.
Exactly, yeah. That was back in the 80s now. I'm afraid that was mid-80s, I'd say.
And how did you go from having the crack and the fun cycling over and back to Claremorris to go swimming to end up actually racing in cycling and getting heavily involved in the sport of cycling, not just locally in Mayo, but actually on a national, international level?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We came across, actually, one of those cyclists going over to Claremorris. On the way home, we came across a local race in Hollymount. It was to do with the Hollymount 10K run race. But they had a race on prior to that, a recycle race. And we seen the cyclists coming around. I said, geez, look at the buzz of this. Lead cars, horns, an MC roaring. And I had never seen anything like that before. I said, geez, this is class. I didn't know anybody in it, but I was saying to myself and my friend James, I says, geez, I'm going to see, can I get into that for next year? So we watched the race, went home, made a bit of contacts around who's involved in cycling, who's involved with the Hollymount Cycling Club. That was the only cycling club that we knew of at the time. And lo and behold, we got a hold of Sean Stagg. My first spent out with him, it was in the middle of, I'd say, December. And I went out with a pair of shorts and just a woolly jersey. There was woolly jerseys that wasn't even lycra. It was woolly jersey back then. Went out for a spin with him. He couldn't believe it. I cycled out, it was probably just, the ground was frosty and it was really cold. So I would say it's probably somewhere between -1 and 3 degrees at best. So no arm warmers, no leg warmers, no gloves, just popped it out with him. And he says, come here, you can't go cycling like that. So he tutored me, in fairness. And so I used to go for spins, and after one thing led to another. By the following year, that was my first proper race, was actually that Hollymount race. So it took me a year to get into it, basically.
What age were you then, Padraig?
I would have been 14. Around 14 I started. But I was involved in a lot of sports. Like, it wasn't just cycling. I was hugely involved with boxing at the time. And I did a lot of rugby as well, and track and field, cross country, running.
Did you go to school at all, did you?
I used to turn up for school. School was rest time. But I saying all that, then like back then, like there was no such thing as a free ride. Like, so I used to work in the evenings. I always had part-time jobs either in the evenings or on a Saturday. That was to kind of help Joe pay the little bits and pieces of bills. So I was only getting small monies, but it definitely helped to pay for some of the stuff. No such thing as getting mommy or daddy buying me a bike. That wasn't the case when I was growing up. You had to, if you wanted a bike, you had to save up your own way, and that's how I got into it. I learned to appreciate the value of everything very early, very young.
You've mentioned loads of other sports that you're involved with. How did cycling become the number one sport for you then?
I loved adventure. I loved going down back roads. Like when I was a kid, every back road within, I'd say, a 10-mile radius. And I mean, as a kid, from my first adventure was at 5. My mother and father nearly lost their lives when I took off at 5. I was gone for hours. And I'm just looking at my wee fella now. He's 7. Like if he was gone for 5 minutes, I'd lose my life. But I was gone for hours, gone off exploring roads and seeing where this road went, what that road went, going through floods. I was mad into all sorts of that kind of stuff. I don't know where that came from because my father never cycled and neither did my mother. It's in me. It's just I want to go exploring, and I'm still at that to this date. It could be a hike, it could be getting on the gravel bike and just see where an old bog road will bring you up, and then you might have to hike the bike across a hill or across a mountain. That wouldn't put me off. So I love that kind of stuff.
And you're still doing loads of it?
Still doing loads of it, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're still on the journey from the racing period. So you did 12 of the Ross events over 3 decades. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, when I look back at it, at the time, when you're racing, you're in a bubble. I'll be straight up and honest here. Like for 30 years, I was in a bubble of racing. You race during the summer or from spring to summer, and then you train during the winter. And I'll be straight up and honest, I was definitely in a bubble. My whole social life and all that was revolving around cycling. And I suppose when I look back, I definitely put too much emphasis on my cycling and my friends in cycling, and I probably neglected other parts of my life. But that was just the way it was. That's what I wanted to do, and that's what I was doing, and I enjoyed it. The Ross was a big part of that. Like my first Ross was in 1993, and I had a bad crash on the 8th stage in that. It was in a collar for quite a while after it. And then my next Ross was 96, and then I did another one again in 98, 99. Then I went off to Australia, gallivanting for a few years. So I didn't go back to the Ross again until 2003, and then I did 2003 straight to 2008. Went away from it again, went off adventure racing then. That was when the adventure racing started. And I got completely captivated by it really fitted my type of demeanour, my type of, I suppose, exploration and going out finding different mountains, different hills. So I did that then again from 2008 until kind of 2013. But I went back to the Ross in 2012. We were very lucky there at Gary Higgins of Centra there in Laban, and he's another shop in Escrowan. He supported us for 3 years, and another guy called Damien Foley there with Ireland Recyclers. So that, once we had some monies there to put a team together, like we got a lot of, I suppose we were getting guys to do the Ross that really would have been probably past their sell-by date per se, but they never actually got to do the Ross. So we put in huge training plans over winters, and yeah, that got us through till 2014. So that's how the whole Ross thing that's how that worked off. But it wasn't continuous. I wasn't always in the Ross bubble. It's just I'd come in, come out, because the Ross is very taxing. Like if you're committing to the Ross, you're leaving everything else to one side. So
and for the listeners, Padraig, who are outside of Ireland who wouldn't know what the Ross is, will you just explain what it is?
Yeah, the Ross it's an international cycle race. It's Ireland's only international cycle race at the time. When I started off, the Ross was 9 days. Average stage distance would be somewhere around the 140 to up to 180 and 190 k's. And latter years, then it became what's called a UCI recognised race, and that means they brought in higher grade pro teams. And so definitely from from 2008 upwards, the standard of the Ross really increased. Whereas prior to that, it was mostly Irish amateurs, the English amateur teams, and a few European amateur teams. But that all changed in 2008 onwards, so it definitely became more pro. And then Puss took it over, and that gave it a very much a pro feel. That the gantries at the start and at the finish, getting paraded around the town. There was mail shots done here, there, and everywhere. Like it really got a higher profile. It's just a pity, like it hasn't been on for the last 3 years because of 1 year had no sponsors, and the last 2 years has been to do with COVID. So I hope it comes back, because like cycling needs a marquee event. And as I was growing up, the Ross was the marquee event. There was no other race that came anywhere close to it. There was no other race got anywhere near amount of coverage as well as the Ross. So I really hope it comes back for, I suppose, for the next generation of Irish cyclists coming through. They need to have something to aspire to.
And it's also, I suppose, a springboard as well, Padraig, for those athletes or those cyclists who are at a certain level but need to jump up to hit the continental level to make it to a pro team. So, doing the Ross on your own doorstep was a good springboard as well for future potential professional careers.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now, that never bothered me, but if I see for the likes of David O'Loughlin, like, he was well recognised around the Irish circuit. But the minute he hit the Ross, he just seemed to jump 5 levels in his first Ross, and that brought his ability to everybody's attention. This guy's got serious talent, and we had talk about that earlier on in the year about how David's career. So you need the Ross, you need events like that. Otherwise, your measurement tool is not there. You have no measurement. You have no way of saying, well, how good are you? It's not good enough to be winning a local race. You have to pit yourself against, say, internationals, and those internationals generally have ridden at a way higher level. So I think it's good. It's a good measuring stick.
Now, you are a postman, but you also are a coach with Cycling Ireland. You're the chairperson of Western Lake Cycling Club. You're the PRO for Connacht Cycling. Like, your whole life really revolves around cycling. What does a typical day look like with the commitments that you have to your 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job? You are on your bike doing the post around, the Flying Postman as we call you, your commitment to the different cycling organisations that you're involved with, and then the coaching that you do as well. And I know that you worked as a youth development officer as well and head of coaching for a number of years with Cycling Ireland. So you've invested a huge amount back into the sport that's brought you so much fun and joy and adventure over the years.
I suppose, I like to see developments. I like to see things move on, and I suppose my years working for Cycling Ireland from 2001 to 2005, like, it gave me a grasp of what it was like to work with volunteers. And I was working with volunteers not just in Mayo, it was everywhere, all over the country. And then that transpired where I was going abroad with teams and all of that. So I got to see a whole lot of stuff. And back then, I wasn't sure what to make of the whole thing. I didn't really know. And because I was thrown in, my kind of remit was increase youth numbers. That was basically it. No one really knew how to do it, and I was thrown in at the deep end. Get it done. It just transpired at the time that members in Cycling Ireland, that it was never at any job. That was the lowest in its whole. I suppose since it was set up, the membership was at it was under 2,000 members for the whole country. That wasn't 2,000 youths now. That was 2,000 for the whole country, and it was a case of working with clubs, working with individuals, setting up a few youth camps. At the time, everything was road racing. That was the pinnacle. You had to get them into cycling the bikes. It also coincided with the Celtic Tiger era, where people didn't want to cycle. People wanted the luxuries, that they were making big money. I don't know where the money went to, but they were making big money anyway. Buying houses, buying cars, getting takeaways. Ireland's whole infrastructure back then changed, where people were using bikes one time to commute. Like, that was frowned upon, and so I found it a really hard struggle to get people cycling. And we had a lot of initiatives. We started off with the cycling safety and skills program. We ran that through Barbara Connolly, and we had different pods all around the country. That was very successful. And that it got kids back on bikes in the school environment, in a safe environment. But the way I look at kind of as a development officer's role, it was recruit, develop, and then you had to retain. So we got them in. We did loads of different promotions. We used the Ross. We used huge big races, and we brought in the kind of the leading lights at the time, Davy O'Loughlin and Mark Scanlon. They came about. They went into schools. They were talking about cycling, about their careers and where they were able to go, and that was huge for us. And lo and behold, the numbers started to increase. But it was mostly down to it was only in pockets. There was a few key clubs, and those key clubs had, I suppose, they had good coaches, and they brought them through. And then if you look at it now, like I see the way, say, French and Belgian and Dutch cycling is being, I suppose, developed. That has all changed. Like, it's all about doing a whole load of disciplines, cyclocross, doing even stunt riding, mountain biking, enduro type riding, like, and road. But the road is left a bit later. Like, at the time, we felt we needed to get the underage racing at a younger age. And looking back, that I think that has been a mistake. Some of them came through, but I'd say equally an awful lot more left the sport. There was too much peer pressure for them to get results, and they got results young early on. It felt like they were going to be the next Sean Kelly and Stephen Roach, which never transpired. So that was a good learning curve. I suppose, that was it from the youth development role. Like, and you asked about, like, what's my standard day. My standard day is I'm up every morning at 4:30, and I'll probably go to bed at about 10:30. And in that day, literally anything can happen. I deal a lot with emails, a lot with WhatsApp, talk to various kind of people that are going to get things done. And every day is completely different, but it involves a lot of time around cycling. I'll be straight up and honest with you, be it either cycling or talking about cycling or talking about developments in cycling or what can you do, coming up with events. I'm all the time coming up with different mad ideas. So I'm lucky enough, I don't need a lot of sleep, but when I do sleep, I sleep well.
I was just thinking 10:30 to 4:30, like, that's not even 8 hours. How many miles do you cycle or kilometers do you cycle every day?
I use about 5 days a week I'm on the bike, but I cycle every day in the post. So I'm getting 2 hours cycling every day in the post, whether I'm out cycling, whether it's rain, sleet, snow, frost, you name it, I'm out. So, but I also walk. My route has about 2 hours of cycling and it has about 3 hours of walking. But I walk on average about 15 to 17k a day as well with the post. So I'm getting fitness, whether I like it. Now, come here, it's not power walking or anything like that. It's just walking. But I've put trackers on me just to see what I'm doing. And
And how many times do you stop to have the chats with the people you're delivering the post to? I mean, we talk about 15, 20k of walking. How long does that take you when you're doing all the chatting? Or maybe during COVID, you can't do much chatting now.
Well, there's a famous saying, don't hear from me. They say I'm faster than email, so I don't get a chance to talk to them. I'm gone before they come out. That's what they say anyway. I don't know. I want to hear what they say. The post job is a very sociable job in that you meet a lot of people and you meet all walks, like all nationalities. Like, when I'm up in Westport, like I'd say 10 times a day I'm asked where this, that, and the other is, or how did you get to some place? And then you have to chat and say, well, did you go to this place? Did you try that? And where are you coming from? So, I'm all the time at that slobbering as well.
You're like a real tour guide. You're like Rachel Nolan when she's up in Ballina.
I have too much information and
too much. I know. And speaking of Rachel Nolan and speaking of crazy challenges, I'm going to jump straight into the Everesting challenge, which was your most recent crazy adventure that you did. And we'll go back across some of the other bits and pieces in a minute. But talk to me about the Everesting challenge, because you decided to do this off the side of Patrick. You gave yourselves less than a day to do it. And you climbed a phenomenal amount of meters to hit the Everesting challenge off the side of the mountain called Schelp, is it?
Schelp, yeah. We were calling it Ab to Schelp by the time we were finished. But basically, Schelp was an old path. I won't say old path. It's the Western Way. It's part of the Western Way coming from Leanon. And it goes over the ridge of Patrick. And there's a section on that we use. It's 700 meters. The Schelp itself is over a kilometre long. And we decided we were going to go for what's called a soil Everesting. So a soil Everesting meant it had to be done on either, obviously, no pavement whatsoever, no concrete, no tarmacadam, none. It had to be either gravel or clay or whatever, but it could not have any pavement. And the whole idea of that is last year we did a virtual Everesting on Zwift, and that was a fair challenge. But this one we just decided. I always felt I like to do a road Everesting, but Ronan McLaughlin blew us out of the water with his 2 or 3 world record attempts, or not attempts, that he has. So that kind of took the good out of that. But then we did a bit of looking around, and we couldn't see nobody that did any soil Everesting. There was a few other on the Hells 500 websites. They have different kind of badges. So if you do it on a section of iconic trail, so the Western Way would be an iconic trail, that got a badge. If you were the first time to ever do it on an off-road path, that got a badge. Then if you did it on a short one, a short climb, so the max amount of kilometers you can accumulate is 200 kilometers. So we broke that one. And then we did it obviously on soil, so it was gravel path. So we got that as well. So we got a lot of little badges out of our Everesting, and that all stemmed from COVID. Basically, we used to use scalp from my house to the top. I'll accumulate over 300 meters of climbing. So I have a little route there that we used to use. So in a 90-minute cycle, you could get nearly 1,000 meters of climbing and not be on the same track, which is nuts. That's between going down into the Omea bogs and coming back up. And it was all off road. So for 90 minutes, that's the best bang for buck train session I can do around here. From that, then I said, Jesus, wonder could you do an Everesting on it? And that's where it all stemmed from. So Brian Hyland was the other man behind it. And then we had to rope in. We threw it out to a load of people, in fairness. It went from 40 down to 10 very fast. And then it went down to 5 at the end. It was only 5 of us that took it on. So it was a bit of a nuts challenge, but it was epic in that, like on the train sessions, we'd be out there. I think the only thing we seen one day was a sheep for the whole. We were out there for 9 hours. Now one person passed us. Now it wasn't a wet evening or anything like that. It was just a standard day. But we only met one person or one sheep for the whole day. And whereas on the day we did it, like there was hundreds out there. People were just coming out to find out where Scalp was. Up there with drones and cameras. Jeez, the footage that came off it was unbelievable. So it was cool. It was a really cool thing to do.
So 5 of you started. Did 5 of you finish?
Unfortunately not, no. Brian, I suppose Brian paid the price for it. He went a little bit hard early on and felt good. And it caught up with him later on. He ended up dehydrating himself and he ran out of gas, and it was actually the doctor had to pull him in the end. He didn't want to stop, but he had only 600 meters to go. That's all he'd left. So basically, it was about 8 climbs is all he had to do.
To get the 8,848 meters, which is the height, that is the height, isn't it? The 8,848.
Yeah. How
many ups and downs did you have to do on that trail to get the challenge done?
I ended up doing 106 climbs. And that got me just over 9,000 meters. They always recommend to do 1 or 2 extra climbs just in case your Garmin or how Hells measured it, Hells 500, they're the governing body of this Everesting. They measured off your Strava file. So even though my Wahoo Roam, it gave me, I took a time from when it passed the 8,848 meters. I had to be certain, so we did I did actually an extra 3 climbs just to get over 9,000, and just to be 100% sure. Like, you spend that little length of time out on that hill, and to find out then that you were short, it'd drive you nuts. So, yeah, we ended up doing a few extra climbs. We all did extra climbs. Everyone did extra climbs. And
what was your final finishing time?
I was just under 16 hours, 15 hours, 55 minutes. Now, we didn't go out to set a record time, and we did take our time we didn't take long breaks. Rachel Nolan was right on my heels, so I didn't want a lady pass me out. Sorry, Rachel.
She was second across the line from what I remember on the day.
She was second, yeah. She pushed me right to the wire. Now Rachel's more used to doing the real ultra stuff. Yeah, she's strong, and she had a very good strategy. Yeah, we were keeping an eye on her all day, but it was a good old battle between us. Like, it wasn't intentional. It's just the way it worked out, and she wanted to know where I was. I wanted to know where she was, but it kept both of us in tune, and we were trying to as well. We were also trying to get finished before it got pitch black. And unfortunately, it was dark when we were finishing, and just to give you an idea of, it was taking us maybe somewhere between 6.5 up to 9 minutes to climb it. We started off at 6.5 minute pace, and by the end of it, we're at 9 minute pace climbing. But we're always coming down in under 50 seconds. We're coming down at 60 odd k an hour. So I know a lot of people were frightened towards the end because they felt we were going too fast for the amount of time we were out. But we were on good machines. We were all good bike handlers. But that's the kind of speed we were coming down at. It was nuts.
That's crazy. Yeah. I imagine the adrenaline was absolutely flying.
Yeah, because you had to have that's what I found. Yeah, there was that buzz, because when you're on gravel, your back wheel was always, and it wasn't straight down. It wasn't like coming down off Mamore. There was 5 corners on it. Now, there weren't 90-degree corners, but there were corners. You were blind. You couldn't see around. So we were coming down at big speed. Yeah, it was a really good buzz. And that's what we were treated as.
I think when I spoke to Rachel after it, she said it was just like a moving bike buffet. She just kept eating the whole day. So aside from the training that you would have done for the attempt, Padraig, how important was your nutrition and getting that right on the day? You mentioned poor Brian Hyland not making it to the finish because of maybe overexerting himself or maybe getting dehydrated. But when you're taking on, no more than when you're taking on the likes of an Ironman or a marathon or an ultra event, nutrition and fueling is so important.
Oh, huge. Yeah, huge. Like, the plan was every single time I had a small bottle, not a full bottle now, but I was drinking out of that on the turnaround section. It was a little bit, it wasn't too steep. So it was the only place really we could have a drink. You couldn't have a drink coming down because obviously the speeds we were doing that, and we were doing that on gravel. So it was just impossible. You had to have 2 hands in the bar. So we were drinking, and I also had a little snack. I used to have a snack there as well. And all we're doing is bites, little bits all the time. And my own strategy was we worked off 1,500 meters first, knocked that out. And then after that, I went to kind of 600 meter stops. So I did 600 meters of elevation, which was working out at about 8 climbs. Then I'd stop for maybe 7-8 minutes, cups of tea, different types of drinks, lots of baby potatoes. That was my big thing, baby potatoes. But it's funny, I had such an array of stuff. I have an awful funny, how would you say it? My palate is, when you're doing those, I always found your palate changes. Like someone came out with lovely chicken tenders, and I had them later on at around 12 hours in, and I'm not messing. They were like caviar. They were just beautiful. So I yammed them back. But I'm lucky. I can nearly eat anything, but I have to have an range. So I had an awful range of stuff, from nougat bars to little muffins. As I said earlier on, the garlic potatoes, or baby potatoes dressed in garlic and garlic butter and salt. I ate a lot of those. Had little slices of ham, tiny little bread rolls. Had literally an awful array of stuff now, I'll be honest.
A bike buffet.
A bike buffet, yeah. And I know, like, you might say, well, that wouldn't be practical for an Ironman. For us, we had a full-on Mary and Noel Brady did a monster job at around what I call the transitional area. We had stretching mats. They were helping us. They were rubbing us out. Like, there was always hot stuff available if you wanted hot stuff. So if someone came in and said, I wanted a sandwich, that was available. If you wanted baby potatoes, that was available. If you wanted to stretch out, that was available. So they ran that all day for, like, they had a horrendous job, and keeping tabs on it as well, and making sure at the pits area, or the transition area, say there was Padraig McLaughlin. Every time we came in with the bike, he'd bring the bike over, clean the chain, check the brake pads, check the tires, make sure that we're losing no air. It was just like Formula One. We'd go in, we'd eat. Most times we'd stretch for a minute or two. He'd give us the nods up, the bike is ready, and go again. And he was doing that for the 5 of us. Noel, Porrick and Mary. They did that. There was loads of others that came in as well. There was Ruth Hyland, there was Eda Malahi, there was Hilary Hughes, there was Dr. Rinton. Like, there were so many people there. They were all willing to give us some form of a hand, and we all needed it. Like, it was a big team effort. It's class.
Has anyone decided that they're going to try and do it again themselves now after what you guys have done, that you've paved the way on Skelp to do it? So there might be another 5 riders that'll decide to saddle up on a gravel bike and off they go.
It's hard to know. I would hope so. I hope someone would have a go at it. Like, I suppose, to put it into context, we did I suppose 10 years ago we did the anniversary. Actually, it was last Friday we did the anniversary of climbing Croagh Patrick 12 times in 24 hours, and I would have thought loads of people would have had to go at that record, but no one ever did. And last Friday we met up and we did a kind of a now alternative climb of Croagh Patrick. We went up from the Lecamvy side, came across the ridges, came down Croagh Patrick, and we actually did a retake of the photos, the one that kind of us on the last climb before we came down. And then we took another one outside of Campbell's bar with a different owner. Pat Holmes is now the owner at the moment and the proprietor. So same order, same people, 10 years later. So it's kind of that was unique. And I would have thought loads would have done it in between, but they didn't. So with the same thing with the Everesting, I would hope loads would do it, but who knows? You need a group, you see. That's the way I love. That's what I love about cycling. I'm not really a great individual for doing stuff on my own. I don't get any buzz out of it. And I have done a few records myself, but I found there's no real buzz. My buzz is, you've seen how far you can push other people. And sometimes people crack, and that's part of it. Even our spin back today, like, there was an awful helter-skelter back from, it started in Gort and it didn't finish until we got to Westport. But obviously, we didn't all come in together. It was just the way it is. But we regrouped after we met inside in town. We had the banter. But you always want to see who's going to crack. And that just so happens to be what I love about our little bits and pieces of fun.
Training for that Everest challenge, what sort of training did you have to put in? And how did the experience differ between what you did on Zwift versus the real life stuff?
Oh, they're worlds apart. Like, on Zwift, you climbed up to Zwift. You can freewheel down, so you didn't actually have to be on the bike. The bike just went down itself. Like, that wasn't the case in the real thing. The one thing I found with Zwift is, your body, when you get out of the saddle, your bike doesn't sway from side to side. Whereas when you're doing the real thing, your bike can sway from side to side. So you get definitely a bit of relief that way. But it's way harder on your system. It wasn't my legs that gave me problems doing the Everesting. It was my shoulders and my arms, like the constant pull. I felt like my shoulders were going to pop, and even for the even since, like, I was getting rub outs on the shoulders. It was just from that sustained position for so long. On Zwift, you get a break every time you climb. You get a break for 10 minutes, and you can stop and stretch out and the whole lot. But every time you do the real Everesting, like, we had no break. We had to be more switched on coming down the descent than we had to be going up. Going up, you just had to pedal. But coming back down at the speeds we were doing, you're on your brakes, or you're feathering your brakes. You didn't really want to be on your brakes. You had to be constantly watching. Would a person walk out in front of you? There were so many people there. We that kind of caught us on the hop, and people were walking over and back, and so we had to keep an eye on that all day. So it was definitely a different type of challenge. I found I was mentally drained after the soil or the everything we did there lately. Whereas the one that we did on Zwift, the next day I could have gone for a spin, no hassle. And I didn't even, I think by the end, I actually raced a few days after it. Whereas I couldn't do that with the one we did there lately. No way. Different scene.
And did you ever want to give up when you were on the soil challenge, or was the threat of Rachel coming up behind you enough to spur you on?
Oh, the threat of Rachel. Jesus, she passed me. It would have been, I'd never heard the end of it. I never heard the end of it anyway, but I'd never heard the end of it if she passed me. And she'd have made sure of that. And I knew she had the work done. She took it very serious. And we took it quite serious. We had a few benchmarks. Our first training day was 3,000 meters on Skelp. And then we had set about 3 different dates to do 5,000 meters, but we actually never got to do 5,000 meters on Scalp. But we were lucky. We did a lot of training because we were putting the Mayo Ultra together. I had to make sure that route was 100% as per the way we designed it. So we actually cycled all that route over a few days. So that was a big part of our training. And then we'd have to go over, I might rechange sections. So I'd have to go back out again, recycle it. We also put in literally every hill we could find in Mayo in the Ultra. So that all that climbing really helped the Everesting. So the two of them actually helped each other. Rachel was part of that little quartet as well. She was going out checking the route for us, giving her insight into what she felt an ultra needs to include. So both of them really worked well together.
So this is the Wild Mayo Ultra in 2 weeks' time. So it'll be a week's time from when the show is live. I did cycle part of it out around Furness and Newport, and I can tell you that you did find some queer hills and strange roads, but it's absolutely breathtaking. I won't be around to do it this year, but I definitely would look at doing it in the future because it looks absolutely amazing.
We're basically using the full coastline of Mayo, and we're also using all the border along the south and east of Mayo. And we hit every iconic, say, tourist spot that Mayo has to offer. And so we're lucky Mayo.ie are pulling in on that. They've seen what we're trying to do. And I think it's going to be a really unusual event going ahead. I know there is a few other ultras around the country, but I just feel we have Mayo is always an unusual place to cycle. I've cycled in Donegal and Kerry and all the rest of it, but I don't know, between the roads and the winds, and I think the roads are a little bit quieter. We've definitely quieter roads on the extremes as along the coast roads, and the likes of East Mayo there. To me that was completely untouched, but it's really good cycling country, and we've quite a lot of navigation into it as well. So it's going to stress the old teams a little bit. The support staff, they'll be on their lookout to get everything right.
You don't make things easy, Padraig.
No, well, I suppose it's part of what I do. Like if you want to do these good things right, you have to, like, I seen what the likes of RAM was, the race across America, and that was far from easy. I know I didn't get to ride it, but I was doing support for the Navan team back in 2008, and that opened my whole world to what ultra was. Like, that's 3,050 miles, nearly 5,000 k. Like, that's what's real ultra. So really 650 k's or the 300 k's in Mayo, in theory, shouldn't be too hard. But what I want the people to do, the participants that are signing up for these events, both Brian and myself, we put this together, and we want them to have an experience, not just a race, but to have an experience and say, wow, I didn't realize that was there. I never cycled that road. Why wasn't that hill ever mentioned to me before? Like, that's what we've done with the ultra. We've taken what we've known and our experiences of Mayo, and we've put it into an event. That's basically what we've done.
And will you ever get to race it yourself, do you think?
No, not in this current format. No, it'd be very awkward. I don't think we'd be able to do it. But I love to go up and do the likes of Donegal, or get involved back again with the race around Ireland, with Alan Healy's race around Ireland. I'll get my buzz out of that. Like, I've cycled all the routes, so I know literally every nook and cranny in the whole course. So I'm happy with that.
You mentioned Alan Healy there, and there is the 24-hour race in Mondello Park that's taking place in October as well. So there are quite a few ultra races now, which I suppose is kind of indicative of the interest that people have to step up maybe from being a leisure cyclist or a racer cyclist to look for something different. I know there's a couple of the lads here in Galway are doing your race. They decided not to go long in triathlon this year, but to actually challenge themselves with the Mayo Ultra. But there definitely seems to be a growth in that sport, and it's a very different type of racing to the bunch racing. I personally much prefer the long endurance stuff than the bunch racing. Of course, I'm just scared of all the riders around me, whereas when you're in an endurance spin, you're pretty much on your own and you're relying on the support crew with you, or if it's unsupported race, which I haven't tried yet. But there has been a big growth in ultra racing in recent years.
Yeah, well, if you look at it, say worldwide, in America or Europe, they're huge. They're monsters. Like they've all these massive ultra events, and they're getting more publicity as well because obviously social media helps to highlight them. In Ireland, if you look at the running has been huge the last number of years. Yourself with Ironman, you've brought Ironman Galway, you had Ironman down in Cork. Like that's bringing, they're all fair enough. There is a few athletes that'll break the 10 hours, but generally most people are over the 10 hours. So that's what ultra as well. Most of the events are over the 10 hours or go on to 24 hours. And people are looking for that extra little bit of challenge. Can they do it? And you know yourself, if you want to put yourself into that game, it means you have to do a bit of work and you have to do a bit of training. You're not going to jump in from 5 weeks out and just say I'm going to do an ultra. You're going to have your homework done beforehand, and it means you're going to have at least a 200k spin done on your own, and you have to know your body fairly well. We're appealing to it. I would call it, say, I won't say the more mature athlete, because the guy that won in the Donegal 555, young Conor Gallagher, like he was only 22. He's only a young fella. But we're appealing to that type of athlete, Joe. We're looking for them to go out and explore themselves. And I think that's what people are looking for. They're looking for a little bit of adventure. They're looking for definitely a challenge, something that's not just a little tick box. They're looking for a real challenge. And I think that's what Ultra is going to do.
Yeah, and I think as well, while we're recording this, the Transatlantic Way Ultra is underway at the moment, from Derry to Cork, unsupported. That's the race that Rachel Nolan won last year. I mean, that's a completely different ball game to having a supported race with the crew behind it. Padraig, you mentioned there about knowing your body and knowing, how to manage yourself for racing, I suppose, really. But you had a bit of a health scare yourself back in 2014 that saw you curb your enthusiasm a little bit for some of the high intensity stuff, but yet you're still forging ahead with, as you call it yourself, the slobbering with the local races or some of the long endurance stuff. But can you tell us a little bit about what happened to you in 2014 and how you've managed to come out the other side of it?
Yeah, I suppose it happened after a local time trial. I mean, a local club league time trial. I basically got what's called a SCAD, it's a spontaneous coronary artery dissection. Exceptionally rare. They weren't quite sure what really caused it, but basically they said I pushed too hard, and that was the explanation that was given at the time. So at the time, I literally got a heart attack. I got a blockage. My inner wall of the artery tore, caused a blockage, caused a small little heart attack. I was lucky. I was diagnosed. I felt unwell very early on that day, and I came out in a real heavy sweat. I mean, more than a normal sweat, and ended up being brought into a doctor's surgery. I never left the doctor's surgery. I left it in an ambulance. They said I was exceptionally lucky to be alive. That generally, if you get a blockage like that, if it doesn't open straight away, your heart has been starved with blood, and it's bye-bye. But lucky enough, the doctor recognised I have a problem. I was rushed to Castlebar, and Castlebar, they said this is a bigger problem than they couldn't sort out. So I was brought up to the Galway Clinic, and that's where I got diagnosed with the SCAD. And they had to fix the artery. Basically, my artery had collapsed, and to fix it, they had to put a stent in to keep the artery open. For the next 6 months after, I was on literally very light duties, and for about 3 years after, I never really felt properly 100%. And I suppose it gave me a lot of thinking time, because straight away all of the competitive stuff, that all stopped. All my training stopped. There was no such thing as training for quite a while after it. And it was a lot of, I was going from doctor to consultant to more doctors to different tests, and they couldn't really explain. So I went down the alternative route in the end. And at the time that I had my problem, I that particular year, I never felt I had what I would call decent form. I always felt off, like guys that I would normally, I don't like using the word beat or whatever, but guys that I would definitely perform better against were hammering me. And I was seemed to be all the time pushed against the tide, against low morale. But looking back at it, I always had these kind of, they weren't proper cold sores. They were kind of like, it was like cuts on my face. And they kept coming up. They nearly go in, and you think you're on top, the next minute they'll be back again. If you pushed anyway hard, they come back. So basically, after going down the alternative route, it was actually 3 years after, they more or less said I had parasites in my system, and that went basically, the parasites kind of, they hide in the places where blood doesn't get at it, and where normal medicine won't have to cure it. So I was on all sorts of concoctions for about 6 months, different types of concoctions. But I felt it. I felt it straight away. Once they gave me the concoction for clearing the parasites, and had that out of my system, I knew nearly instantaneously my body's back. I've strength back. And then it was a case of maintenance after that, and really looking in at. I was taking niacin, I was taking vitamins, proper vitamin C, not vitamin C you just buy out of those, I call them sweets, not that kind of vitamin C, proper vitamin C. I was taking a lot of oils, from cod liver oil to loads of olive oils, flaxseed oil, that kind of stuff. Took loads of that, and I had to look at my nutrition quite a bit. A lot differently. I wasn't feeding my body, even though I was feeding it good food, it was lacking nutrients, and hence that's why I was coming out with these little breakouts, and obviously let the parasites thrive. So I went back to normal medicine and tried to clear this out with them, and they didn't seem to want to. They said no, not really that. But the bottom line is, I went back and said, right, enough sulking, enough sitting around, and because it was like, people might think, said, oh, he's coped with that well, but I remember at the time, like, I wasn't myself, Joe. You couldn't cycle it. I couldn't cycle it out with my mates. Like, I went from being very popular cycling to being nobody. You were gone. I wasn't involved with committees, and no one wanted to know, which I was a little bit disappointed. When you look back on it, people just left you, Joe, out of sight, out of mind. You're a nobody. So you went from getting results, being in everybody's best mate, to gone. So after a few weeks, from he's recovering away, we'll leave him alone, and then you're being left alone, and then no one talked to you. So I look back on that time and says, wow, Jesus, John, that's what happens. You can see what happens to top sports people when they go from, they go out and they finish their careers and they retire from sport. If they don't have another medium, as in, to be kept involved in the sport, you can very easily see why they can go down the depression road. But I look back, I think I'm stronger for it. I did a lot of reading, a lot of research. I was determined to make myself better and stronger and come back to racing. I never worried about coming back to racing. I always felt, you can race week in, week out. I wanted to do different stuff and try new things. So, but little by little, I'm back pushing a little bit and doing what I want, rather than what somebody said, well, this race program is on. I got back to doing what I wanted. And I think that's important.
It must have been very difficult to come back, Padraig, and to try and, find your place again, because I can imagine that when the cycling is pulled from underneath you and you have such a scare with your life, because it is your life flashing in front of you, it must have been awful hard to just put yourself out there again and to come back.
Yeah, I suppose it was. It was happening kind of. I suppose it kind of happened. It wasn't directly. I was happening unawares to myself. I'd sign up and I'd do it. I'd bring a group out to Mallorca or somewhere like that, and you end up doing a hill. And you said, "Geez, yeah, I'm getting away with this." So bit by bit, your confidence came back. But like, my confidence would have been on the floor after that happened. I didn't feel I should be pushing myself. Like, we did a trip 2 years afterwards. I'll never forget, as long as I live. I decided to do from Biarritz to Perpignan, being self-sufficient. So we brought our saddlebags, but like on the first time we went up the Col de Mare Blanc, I couldn't stay with the lads. I kept to a really low heart rate. I had thumping pain in my chest, and yeah, it was a liberating experience to try and get every day done. And saying, "Jesus, when are you going to keel over at any time?" Like, and I remember Mary, my missus, she says, "What about your kid and what about us?" And like, what are you at?
Yeah, when nuts. It's nuts. But also the side of it, Padraig, as well, that you identify so much with cycling, and cycling is so much part of your life. I mean, we spoke about that earlier about your daily routine, and there's so much of your life involved in cycling now that to lose that in the heat of one thing that happened, which had a huge repercussion to your body, to your whole life. A lot of people wouldn't recover from that.
Yeah, I suppose I don't look at it. I never dwelled on it. I just felt I had to get back myself, my own mojo. Doing all the volunteer work and all that. That's kind of just part and parcel of things I wouldn't be happy that I've seen going on within the sport. And I said, right, get involved for a couple of years, get these little bits and pieces done. My own cycling, like my wee fella is cycling now, my partner Mary cycles. It's important that we go out, we get on with it. And it's very easy, I suppose, looking back at it, it would have been very easy to stick your head in the sand, get fond of a bottle and start drinking, or do something different as regards just getting away from the sport. I didn't feel that was the way to do it. I suppose looking back at it, says, no, I'm doing this on my terms. Like, no one will tell me. I suppose I kind of said, no one will tell me what to do, and that's just my mindset.
And well, I can tell you, cycling is the better for it anyway, Padraig, with all the stuff that you've done in recent years. And I don't know you that long, but I definitely admire the amount of work and effort. And you're almost like the unsung hero for cycling in Ireland, for all the stuff that you've done throughout the years. I know I mentioned there about Western Lake CC and the work you're doing with Connacht Cycling, and there's plenty of other bits you're doing as well. And even that Everesting challenge, I mean, I remember chatting to you about it before you did it, and you wanted more youth riders to take up gravel biking and to have more youth riders involved in not just in racing but in other forms of cycling. So you're being an ambassador for the sport of cycling and an inspiration for adults and youths across the board with what you're doing. And I think that's a huge legacy to have. And I think we're very lucky that those of us who are involved in cycling are involved in the sport in whatever level are very lucky to have you on board as well.
Well, no, I suppose if you look back on it, like, there has been a lot of friends that give up their, even though because I'm passionate, they've given up their time as well to help. And that's why I felt, that's important, that it's very easy for one person to keep doing all the work, but you need to pull in other people. And I always feel that that's important. And lucky enough, quite a lot of people have come along and put their shoulders to the wheel, and they've done some great work as well. Like, even I see there that the Connacht committee that's there, like, they're completely, I won't say new to volunteering, but they're new to their roles, and they've learned so much, and they're putting on ladies training camps, bringing down the likes of Killian Callaghan for the youths. Like, that's Jerry Mooney and Gary Collins and Brian Hyland. They're looking after the treasures role, making sure we get more members. Like, so many people are driving it on, from Padraig Quinn. Like, when you look at that, and they all have a passion. Like, and I know I mentioned a few names. That's only a handful of names of that committee. There's 13 on it. It's huge. So it's and it's great to see that. Like, that gives you, you're going down the right road then when you see those people coming in. So that's important.
Absolutely. A couple of questions before I finish up, Padraig. I want to look at parents who are listening in who have young kids who are interested in cycling. What's the best way to get them involved? I know you mentioned earlier that you felt that there was a huge emphasis on road racing for the younger cyclists when they came through years ago, and that may have been a mistake, but that we should have them doing everything from stunt riding to BMX to gravel to mountain. Is that the advice that you would still stand by, that just get them out cycling and get them enjoying the sport for what it is, as opposed to too much of a focus on hard racing or excelling in any one area?
Oh, for definite, yeah. Like you sport, like the sport of cycling is a lifetime activity. Like it's a lifelong, should I say, activity. Like I look at my original mentor, Sean Stagg. He took up cycling at the age of 50. He's now 86, and he's still on the road 2 and 3 times a week, which is nuts. John Ferguson's another man. He's been involved in cycling even longer, and he's in his early 80s as well. And when you see those guys, like that's a lifelong activity. Like that, what the very few sports that can offer you that. And if we're looking to, to curb the whole obesity, like we have to have kids active. And like cycling offers that opportunity to go out and explore. There's new greenways built. Even there, I couldn't believe it when we were cycling down along Lough Derg there from Scariff to Killaloo. There's a greenway there. Now it's not very well maintained, but that's going to get more use. There's a new greenway in Limerick. There's another one looking to be penciled in from Sligo downwards. There's another one going from Mount Cross out. Like that offers people the opportunity to cycle. And cycle on away from traffic. I will admit, and I've seen it firsthand myself, the roads are not a place for kids to be cycling on at the moment. I don't know. We were stopped at the side of the road. A fellow was on the phone. He was obviously texting. He didn't cease, and like the fellow, an old lady that was cycling with me, he missed him at the last second. He pulled out. He was going in towards the ditch, and we were stopped. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it in my eyes. I could see clearly he wasn't looking at the road. He was on the phone, and this is what we're dealing with. It's just horrendous. But getting away from that, that's the negative side. The positive side is there's loads more greenways. There's definitely parks. There's you can go mountain biking literally in all the culture forests. There is the likes of Killarney and Dorowra, Ballahura, Kylebrack. These areas are ready-made mountain bike centres, and take in the greenways, take in the parks. Like there's still loads of possibilities for cycling out there, and it's a brilliant activity for kids, because I think if we're going to teach motors about cyclists, we have to teach the kids how to cycle. They're going to realise then when they become motors, right, well, I have to give that guy or that girl a bit of extra room. If I pass them out at 80k an hour, the wind of my vehicle is going to blow them in. Motors don't seem to have that idea now, and I blame that on the Celtic Tiger, believe it or not, from 2003 to 20, whenever the whole thing went belly up. That generation did no cycling, or very little cycling. Hence, they have no appreciation for cyclists on the road. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I feel. I think that needs to be addressed.
And in terms of your own sporting highlights, what would you say is the standout achievement that you've had as an athlete over the years?
Number one is probably my Gale Force win in 2010. I was so close so many times, I was in lucky 2 years with punchers, and other times in just, I won't call it, just probably bad tactics. But in 2010, I broke the duck, and I was really happy with that. And in 2011, then I won the Adventure Race Series for the country, and that was another, because that means I had to go to courses where I didn't really know, like from north, south, east, and west, and that was another highlight, winning that one as well. I suppose the out and out, from a performance point of view, my Mizenhead to Fairhead is the two furthest parts in the country that you can cycle in one line. Like, I went out to break that record back in 2006 with a limited amount of knowledge and training, and ended up breaking it well. And that still stands to this day. So, like, looking back on it from a performance point of view, I hit that one on the nose, and I had great support there from the guys who backed me up that time. So that's my best one. But there's all sorts of things going on there. Even just some of the swims we did some mad swims as well. Swimming across Loch Mask, that was definitely something unique. No one had done it before, so we decided to do it. I suppose the 12 climbs in 24 hours, that was madness, pure mad. We look back at it. And then the Everesting, that was more madness. So there's all sorts of stuff.
And I mean, the stuff you've mentioned just there, we didn't even get to touch on it in the show at all. And we're already gone over an hour of talking. And I've one final question for you, and then I'm going to let you go have your dinner because I know you're tired and hungry after that 2-day trip to Killaloo. Who or what have been the biggest inspirations to you in your life?
Who or what? Sean Kelly for definite. I was in awe of him from a very young age, and then we got to stay in his house in the winter of 1995, and then he'd be coming up to the Mayo for the Mayo weekend. So he's been he would somebody I would aspire to, from his mental aspect of super tough. Like he was retired, and he was still super tough on himself. 4 years after he retired, he was still super tough on himself and super tough on us, and made us, punished us. But he was trying to get the best out of us. So I definitely admire him. A good friend of mine and a mentor would have been Paddy Doran, who passed away there last week. So he would have been another one. I suppose my parents, looking back, they let me off the leash. So when I was a young fella, I would have been quite wild and did a lot of unusual stuff. So being let off the leash was important. And I suppose my partner, Mary, we've done loads of stuff together. And
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show today and for sharing some wonderful stories and some insights into your sporting life and your sporting journey. You definitely are an unsung hero, and you are the Flying Postman. I know you hate me calling it that, but you are the Flying Postman.
Thanks very much, Joanne.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget you can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out our new website on www.trytalkingsport.com. Would love to know what you think of it. I'd also love to connect on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram. Pop by and say hi, let me know what you think of the show. And if you are new to Try Talking Sport, please do check out some of our previous episodes. You will be impressed and inspired by our guests. Until next time, stay safe, keep smiling, and remember to look for fun and adventure in every day.